I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years. But I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be stage-worthy. If you value the work that I do on Stageworthy, please consider leaving a donation either as a one-time thing or on a recurring monthly basis. Stageworthy is created entirely by me, and I give it to you free of charge with no advertising or other sponsored messages. Your continuing support helps me to cover the cost of producing and distributing the show. Just 4 people donating $5 a month would help me cover the cost of podcast hosting alone. Help me continue to bring you this podcast. You can find a link to donate in the show notes, which you can find in your podcast app or at the website at stageworthy.ca. Now, on to the show. Alicia Richardson is an actor and writer based out of Toronto, a maker of fine soups, a world traveler who desperately wants to have an Italian greyhound one day. Amaka Umeh is an award-winning theatre performer of Nigerian descent who enjoys puns, sweets, and adventures. They both joined me to talk about Alicia's play Sweeter, which is being produced by Cahoots Theatre in association with Rosie Theatre from December 2nd to 17th at Native Earth's Aki Studio in Toronto. Here's our conversation. Which of you would like to give me the elevator pitch for what is Sweeter?
I will volunteer as tribute. So Sweeter is a theater for young audiences play geared towards 3rd grade and up. Our bullseye would be between the ages of 7 to 9 because our protagonist is a little girl who is 7 years old. So typically in a young adult story, the protagonist is the target age of who we want to really come and see the show. So Sweeter is the story of a magical talking mango tree and her best friend, who is a 7-year-old little black girl. And it is set in the year 1887 in the town of Eatonville, Florida. And the two of them learn how to grow together.
That is a delightful description.
Thank you. Right on.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for this show?
So Sweeter was what began as an experiment. I was in Obsidian Theater Company's playwriting unit. And because I was very obsessed and continue to be with Susan Laurie Parks, I did an exercise of 7 plays in 7 days based off of her work doing 365. So if you don't know, Susan Laurie Parks is a prolific playwright, Black woman in the United States who has gotten the MacArthur Genius Grant, who is, trailblazed. She walked so that I could run, essentially. So I did this exercise thinking what would come out of writing a single, short play. And by play, it's just defined as something that has a beginning, middle, and end. So what would happen during these 7 plays in 7 days was that the majority of what I cooked up became the basis of a play that I wrote with Obsidian called Articulation. And then this play was this wacky magical realism thing that did not fit. One of these things is not like the other one. It didn't fit. And even my dramaturg at that time, Mel Haig, who now is the AD of Factory, she was the playwright unit coordinator. She said, this one just doesn't feel the same. Because the other ones took place in the present day, and it was just weird, this is in the past, and this is so wacky and so surreal, it's not of this world. And I was trying to articulate the experience of inhabiting a Black body in spaces that were comical, farcical, sometimes inhospitable. And Mel, gave me this prompt to, really think outside the box, really go for it. And this doesn't even have to make sense in the realm of human experience. It can be a cloud or a dog. And so I thought of a talking mango tree because I feel like Black womanhood can be, exemplified, can be represented by a tree. I feel like we are a very giving and loving and generous group of folks. I think what we have is sweet and juicy. And why wouldn't you?
Yes. Yes.
So we have something that's so delicious and so tasty and so colorful and so vibrant. So that's the positives. But on the flip side of that, I feel like we've been very exploited. And I think that that's something that is true of a lot of crops, is true of a lot of our environment, is that it gets exploited. So to be a Black woman in our society feels like we are loved for what we make, whether that's our food, our hair, our music, our dance, our fashion. Like, people eat it up. But then when it comes to our very persons, that's not as loved as what we make. So our product can be something that people ravenously devour and love and adore and uplift. But our person is something that can be exploited and in some cases destroyed. So I wanted to speak to that really bizarre dichotomy of like feeling like Blackness is so loved, but Black folks are not always. And so thus the play was born.
Now, you mentioned this play was very much like the other plays that you were writing in this process. Did you, when you were starting to write those plays, were you thinking of a theme and this one just sort of like went its own way? Is that what happened, where this one sort of came out so differently?
Yes. Well, the play that I had written is present tense, is called Articulation. And it's designed as, it's just a meditation on what it feels like to be Black in this society in North America. So I'm originally from the States. I'm from Florida. And, growing up in the States, it's like the more violent cousin of Canada. There's a lot of similarities. It's just more scary. So I was trying to articulate what that experience was. So I meditated on it in terms of the five senses. So how does it influence our perspectives? How does it influence the way that we speak? And there's all these different, like, our tastes are, so there's all these different ways that I was using as a vehicle to discuss Blackness and Black folk and how we negotiate space. So this experiment on day 7 was, I think I asked myself, how would I explain being Black, and especially being a Black woman? How would I explain that to a child? How would I use metaphor? How would I simplify it to a child that might not understand commodification, color hierarchies, microaggressions? Like a child of 7 wouldn't be able to wrap their brain around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to that for sure. But Amaka, you are the assistant director on this show. How did you come to this show, and what was your reaction to Sweeter when you first read it or heard about it?
Yeah, I was invited to take on this assistant director role by the director, Tanisha Tate. Very happy to receive this email out of the blue one day. I just read it over and over, and every line was a yes for me. So, I mean, I was shocked and overwhelmed with gratitude. And I had known Alicia for a couple of years, before this, and, just always admired and been inspired by her generosity, her creativity, and just the way that she like opens up worlds for people. I think we met just before the pandemic, and then stayed in touch throughout with our online gatherings, of Black women. Shout out the wine gal them. Big up the wine gals. Yeah. And so I just couldn't believe that, sometimes, and this will happen in this industry where, opportunities will come along that for one reason or another can't be accepted or, just don't work out, but everything just like all of the pieces were just in place so perfectly. And I happily said, absolutely. And then reading Sweeter. Yeah, I remember this like very vividly, taking myself on a date to the Balzacs in Stratford and sitting there with the play with my notebook, being like, okay, let me take this in for a moment, and just the biggest smile on my face. Like I just wrote so many notes and details about my impressions, and it's very on the page, it's very fully realized. Like they could really, characters and action and the progression, like it just lifted off. I could see the characters like, moving around in my imagination. And it really impressed me. And I knew that it would, but it really impressed me, like the fact, what Alicia has spoken to, of the multiple layers on which it resonates. It's so darling. Like I think that any theater for young audiences has to appeal to the adults too, because the children are not going to bring themselves to the theater. We're not there yet. Anyway, we don't have the droid guardians who will watch over them while they're sitting in the seats. And I think, there is a child inside each of us. We all at least have that in common. We were all children once. And I think part of living a fulfilled adult life is tending to that young mind inside of us. And I think this does that really well. It like delights the sort of the more innocent parts of our sensibility, and it challenges our what's the word? Our sense of authority now, as adults, our authority over the world that we inhabit, the world we want to leave behind for generations that are coming. And, and I wept. Like, I don't mean to say, I don't really like to do this, to be like, when someone hasn't seen a thing or read a thing or whatever. Actually, a pal of mine was talking about this recently. Like, if someone's like, oh, you're going to love it, then you have to sit there and like wait to love it, or like will yourself to love it. So, I don't want to, what's it called? Prescribe anybody's reaction, but it rocked my world. I was sitting there at the end of the play, just really emotional at the climax of the narrative. And, I don't want to give too much away, but, the ending really is tied together so neatly. Invites, like, I really like the invitation of like, okay, what's next? The what's next feels very clearly actionable. Like, okay, next step forward is going to be this. I think that's it.
Yeah. Now there's something you mentioned about when, you sort of say to somebody, you're going to love this thing. I get that all the time. People are like, you're going to love this. I find myself not like almost refusing to watch the thing for a while. I'll come to it. I'll come to it later, but there's something about the pressure of you're going to love this where I don't know what if I don't? What if I don't? It's this huge thing. Now, Tanisha is a brilliant director, and I think that she runs a very compassionate, warm room. As far as like putting this show together from the cast to all of the people involved in it with it, what Amaka as an assistant director, how do you complement the room that Tanisha is running?
That's a very good question. This is my debut directorial endeavor, and the majority of my role is coordinating movement. I consider movement my first language. It's one of my favorite ways. I think I call it my favorite way to express myself. And I think language is a thing of the body. So, I was immediately like, I was so thankful to have that anchor, that place where I know, okay, this is what are you hearing that weird buzzing?
I am hearing that. And I don't know if it's coming from you, but we'll press on through and I will try to clean that up later.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I know very clearly what the thrust of my role is, and having worked with Tanisha before, was just very excited to sit beside her and soak up, everything about her process and her approach. But it is difficult. Like, I knew that it would be, but to be on the side of the table that kind of is responsible for the bird's eye view of it all, and we're an audience for the performers to practice with, but we're also the influencer of what the audience will be receiving. It's a lot. I definitely spent the first week of rehearsal kind of like in wide-eyed awe and silence. But yeah, like Tanisha has put together a fantastic cohort of people who are just open. And I think that more than ever, I'm aware of the fact that making art, making any type of creation to share with the world is a very vulnerable thing to do. And as actors, it's done with the voice and the body. You can't rely on anything but your presence, and your intention. And, so it brings to mind a new appreciation for the craft that I'm most familiar with. And then just, listening to the conversation, sitting in on conversations between all of the different aspects of the production team. It's like we could run the world. I feel like we should get theater makers into, policy, into government, because we talk about what we need and we ask if it can be done. And if it can't be realized, what are the alternatives? We find that stage management is constantly taking notes on okay, this is what this actor needs for now. And this is how much space we need over here. And so we're in constant network, just communicating about this world that we're inhabiting, that we're trying to build and share with other people. So yeah, I'm definitely, I knew that I would learn a lot, but I'm learning a lot. My brain is massaged and steeped and marinating and leaking and oozing in the best, most delightful way.
Awesome. Now you mentioned this is your first time directing or in a directorial role. Was this something you thought of for yourself, or did Tanisha blindside you with this?
A little bit of both. I I don't necessarily enjoy telling people what to do, but I will say I'm kind of starting to get the hang of it, and I think I might like it in the future. Yeah, I did imagine that I would inhabit a more directorial or inhabit the more production-y side of things, but I thought that it would most likely be movement related and kind of dance forward. So this is like the best of both worlds. I get to try my hand at that. I mean, I've put my movement on other people before, but never for theater. And yeah, like I get a little bit of an insight into the directorial aspect of things, which I'm also learning to enjoy. I don't believe that I am ready. Like I will be ready to direct anything myself after this, but I'm definitely down to like shadow more directors whose work I enjoy. And obviously, like I could be happy assistant directing from here on out, to be honest. But yeah, definitely having the mind for like bodies in space and how to shape the picture. I'm very into that. And for a moment I thought, okay, so did I pick the wrong thing? Like, should I have been an actor? Should I have gone and been a dancer instead? But a very good friend of mine was like, you can do whatever you want. It's like, praise be, you know, I'm grateful to have a life that awards me these freedoms and a community of people who are willing to allow me or invite me to try my hand at them. So
yeah. You know, back when I was in theater school in the ancient days, the 90s, when I was in theater school, they basically told us only do one thing. If you could do if you're a stage combat person, don't do that. Only be an actor. And that was like, I mean, I guess it worked at the time, but it was so short-sighted in the idea that like we should be able to be all of the things that we are, all of the passions that we have and everything else. It should be things that we can and should embrace because it makes us fuller performers, fuller artists. So this show that started as a short thing that you wrote and became more. Alicia, what's the writing process been to take it from that little thing to this larger play that has like, you know, actors and a whole like staff behind it? What was the process of writing it and getting it to this point?
Wow. So I'm so glad you asked that because it came about in a very organic way and it was a long time coming. So I originally I wrote the first scene 11 pages worth in 2015. So that's when I began working on this piece. And it took me until now to get it made. When I first developed my first draft, I was in the Cahoots Theater Hot House Creation Unit. And under the tutelage and dramaturgy of Marjorie Chan, shout outs, who now runs TPM. And I remembered feeling, you know, a bit overwhelmed and a bit stuck in a lot of moments. I myself, I've been an actor since I was 11, since I was yay high. I've been out here. So there was never any shortage of an understanding of plot. I knew that there needed to be a beginning, middle, end. I knew that I had to cultivate these things. I read a little bit about story structure and all these things. So I did my own research about that and I just compared side by side, like reading plays and trying to understand different story beats and how they work. One of the best things that happened to me in that development process, Marjorie Chan, who did not know me, and I was encouraged by Mel Haig at Obsidian. She's like, you should submit for Cahoots Hot House. And Marjorie was so busy at the time that she didn't have time to read the email that had the attachment in it. So we had set up a meeting for me to go to Cahoots. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've been so, swamped. And so I had the pages in my hand. And then she's like, I'd like to read it now. And I'm like, so I sat across from her and watched her read my work in real time.
Sheesh. Talk about hot house. Let's see.
And when she finished the final page, she closed it and said, I'd love to have you. Yes. And I was overjoyed. I was like, what? Should we talk more about it? I mean, I was like, I've never, that's all I needed. I'd love to have you. And so she just took that chance on me. And we were in one of our hothouse sprints. So something that they do is that there will be like a week-long sprint where all of the writers that are developing something, we're invited to just show up at Cahoots and, plug in your laptop. And then, we each have our coffee or matcha for myself. And then we just, we grind. We're just there plugging away. And I remember talking to her about trying to flesh it out and develop it. And I wrote it out of sequence. I'm the type of writer that writes out of sequence. I might write the end as the first scene. I might write the middle. I don't really know why. And she said, just close your eyes and imagine the plot and just try to picture the images of the piece. Don't worry about the dialogue. Don't worry about stage directions or none of that. Just close your eyes and envision what you see. And so I wrote them down as almost like little tableaus. And I didn't know what any of them meant. I just knew at some point, this one image is going to be created. And so then I put them in a sequence. And I said, I believe this feels like it's a climactic moment. It felt very theatrical. I think this should go towards the end. This image feels more relaxed, more casual. I think this should go towards the beginning. So it was kind of a backwards way of doing it, where I know some writers do all of the story beats first and then they flesh them out. I did the images first. And then I attached the story to those images. And then I fleshed it out. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, that's what really worked for me. And each character is based off of somebody I know. Like, I literally hear the person's voice in my head. Mm-hmm. So that's how I create very distinct character voices, that each individual character in my brain, I'm like, how would this person say it? So one of the characters is inspired by my dear Uncle Ralph. And I know exactly how Uncle Ralph would say that. And so Uncle Ralph is a character, very big character in this play. And I can't wait for my family to see it and go,
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's exciting for them and for you. Before I get into a little later on, I want to talk about both of your theater origin stories, because Alicia, you mentioned about how you've been doing it forever and all this sort of thing. But the way that you've described this play is, I think it's really important for not just young children of color, young Black children, but for all children. And I think this because, when I was growing up, my brother and my sister were both adopted, and my brother is a black child. He's a Black man. It was a Black child, and my sister was a mixed race a child as well. And my parents did their best as white parents, trying to raise Black children to understand their Blackness. But of course, they were white parents and couldn't do that. They didn't know the right things to talk about. They did their best. They tried to research, but we didn't have the internet. It was the 70s. So we were doing our best. And it's the kind of thing that I wish that we had for both my brother and my sister, to see their Blackness on the stage and to see their just themselves on the stage, and to be able to learn how to talk about Blackness in a way that we couldn't give them because we were a white family. I think the play is really important just because of that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I agree. And I mean, thankful for the internet that we have now. All of this access to a wide range of stories and to a network, that helps us to imagine, that we're not alone in the world when it may feel like we are. But yeah, I really think like this is important. I was thinking today about it comes to me a lot, like these voices, that were lost or that are lost. Yeah, like stories that we don't like. I was trying to remember a story that my father told me when I was, a child. This was like one of his go-tos. And it would always bring me so much delight. And, I realized like how formative, how important it is to have like our story, our lore, whatever it may be, that is specific and mystical and, acknowledges, because a lot of the time these stories will have a world view that isn't, kind of the Western or individualistic, like, me, kind of thrust. But how enriching it is to be nourished with like myth that belongs to us,
I'm snapping for those of you who don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just listening. Then I'm out here.
Yeah, because we absolutely can be anything and do anything, and we are infinite. 100%, I believe that so strongly. And we have our own like special brand of magic that I think is important to celebrate and nurture. So yeah, what you're saying about wishing that your siblings had something like this earlier on, I totally resonate. I totally recognize absolutely the importance of that. And I know for a fact, like that's a big part of why Alicia wrote it, to make it available, so that we don't have to say that anymore. We don't have that excuse anymore.
Yeah.
And it's written specifically about Black folks and our experience. So yeah, we're out here.
Yeah.
We are here with the words and stuff.
It's because I think one of the other detriments is the fact that, my brother and I, we were in school in the 70s where we were just talking white stuff, right?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about anything about Black people of color. It was just the white stories all the time. And that's, I think, a product of that particular era of education, which I'm kind of glad is like on the way out, that we're getting more. The classical theater is not just Shakespeare. There's like classical theater from all over the world that we need to explore, because Shakespeare, it's kind of cool, but also like all this other stuff. Shakespeare had like 500 years or whatever. Like let's get some other stuff on the stages. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is your theater origin stories. Now, Alicia, you mentioned that you grew up in Florida and came to Canada. Now, you said here you came for the affordable tuition, but then you got the healthcare and figured, why fight it? But I mean, let's start with your theater origin story. Like, what got you into the theater, and what really brought you to Canada?
Oh, okay. Those are two separate questions. So the first question, my theater origin story. my very first exposure to theater, we would do school field trips as early as third grade, I want to say. And I want to say we saw shows like Cinderella, Peter Pan type stuff. And although I didn't see anybody Black in these productions, I remembered thinking it was intriguing. There was something about it that I was really drawn to. And the moment that I first did it, I was in the fourth grade and I was in the school play. And it was a ton of fun. And I just did it off and on for a few years, just school plays. And I didn't know until I was 14, which I know is still quite young. But I was watching a production, a high school production that I wasn't in because I was on the basketball team and like the schedules conflicted. And anyway, so I remember watching this production of Guys and Dolls, and my friend Genevieve was in it. She was wearing this polka dotted halter dress and she was looking glorious. And she did a twirl and the skirt would fan out in this glorious mushroom type cloud of sorts. And I remembered in that moment thinking, oh, I'm sitting in the wrong spot. That's all I knew. All I knew was that I wasn't supposed to be sitting down here. I was supposed to be standing up there. I just knew I was in the wrong spot. And my whole career has been me finding the right spot and just staying there. So that was the moment that I knew what I was going to do with my life. Now, did I know that I was going to be the one writing it? No. I just thought I was going to be the one doing it. I know I was going to make it, but here we are.
When did you figure out that the writing was a thing that you wanted to do and were good at?
I first wrote poetry and I want to say like short story or something, in high school. And the very, very, very first play that I ever written, I had entered into a contest and I got like runner up for it. It was an old theater known as Florida Stage in Manalapan, Florida, which is unfortunately now no longer operating. But they had this program for youth to engage with theater. And so you could submit to this playwriting competition. I had no idea what I was doing. And I got like runner up and I was like, oh, okay. That was pretty cool because you got a little prize money and you got published in an anthology. It was so cool. And then when I went to school, my undergrad I got from Florida State University. I majored in a Bachelor of Theater and I didn't have time to do any writing because it was very intense there were performance classes. I did dramaturgy classes. I did anything. You had to learn how to do certain technical aspects as well. So I was in like costuming, stage makeup, like I did so many things. And I was trying at one point to do a dual major of literature. So I taken nonfiction, essay, short story, post-colonial literature, poetic device, fiction. I had done all of these literary classes, but I never really bridged the two worlds. It was like in theater, I performed, and in the English department, I wrote novel type stuff. So I never really married the two. And then the next time I would write a play was the final year of my graduate degree at York University, where we have to do a 15-minute solo show and you have to write it, perform it, and direct it. Loved it. I just loved it. I was enamored with the idea that I could say words that were mine. Because I was just dying. Like there was so much, I was just bursting at the seams to say. And the tremendous empowerment of that exercise, it transcends. There's something about it that feels so courageous and so inspiring that it made me feel much more powerful, that I don't just perform somebody else's story, but I get to make my own. And so from there, it's been a wild hodgepodge of sometimes I'm booking a lot of acting gigs and I don't have a ton of time to write. So I have drafts of things just sort of live on my laptop. And sometimes I can't book to save my life. So then I get my drafts done. I don't know. Yeah. So that's how things came to be.
I find as somebody who writes and performs, I find that whole aspect like addictive. Like, oh, I'm gonna do both. Like, I can do both. I'm gonna write it and I'm gonna perform it. And there's something that is so, I don't know, it's powerful to do that, and it's really addictive. Like, you do it the first time, and then you're like, I want more of this. Give me more.
Yes. And then to your earlier point, we only studied a very white Western European male canon.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a ton of study of the African diaspora. So I was really thirsty for more representation of my culture. So I just decided to build that into my project. I was just like, well,
yeah,
I don't want to talk about Ibsen or God help me if I have to discuss or watch Chekhov. Jesus, take the y'all, as we say in the South, y'all gonna have to fix me if you make me sit through. Chekhov. Good night. But yeah, I was thirsty for my culture and to represent that.
Now, you did come to Canada for school.
Yes.
What school drew you here?
Okay, so this is the other story that I'm like, it's a two-parter. Okay, we now travel back in time to the year 2013 of our Lord. I had graduated from my undergrad and I was traveling the world. I was paying off my undergraduate student loan debt as an English teacher in South Korea. And I was having a whale of a time, but feeling very unfulfilled. And there's only so many trips to Thailand, although it is pretty great, but there's only so many trips to Thailand. That's the one continued before it's like, I want to start my actual life now. This is cool and all. Anyway, so me and my then partner at the time sat down and we're like, okay, so what do we do next? And he said that he still wanted to continue traveling, but perhaps go to an English-speaking country because I wanted to go to graduate school. And so I looked at schools in Australia, I looked at schools in the UK, and I looked at schools in Canada because I thought, why not? So I applied all over the place, and I was fortunate enough to get into a few. I even, just for safety and for the sake of argument, I applied for schools in the States as well. I wasn't too keen on, paying the cost of a mortgage to go to school. That's not really my jam. And that's what tends to happen where I'm from. But all the same, I did all the interview processes so when it came time to go to Canada, I narrowed it down to York University. And I think UVic also at the time had a voice teaching component. So I had the really clever idea. And for anyone who's watching this, who is, an emerging artist, here's the little nugget I want to give you. Deliberately pick a Joe job that is going to be tangential to the one that you want. Mm-hmm. So that way you're surrounded by people in the industry. And that way it can be sort of a segue to the job that you actually want. So I knew that I wanted my Joe job to be a voice and dialect teacher. And I wanted to be a professor. And I also wanted to be a coach. And voice class was always one of my favorite classes. And I love it. And I really tend to, really sink into it. I love the sound of the human voice. I'm a really big linguistic nerd. I like to look at, phonetic transcriptions and watch the little diacritic marks. Like I'm very, very. So I said to myself, that's the Joe job that I want to have. And to this day, my professor, Eric Armstrong, shout outs. He's like, isn't it Joe? It's more like a Joseph job.
Wasn't mean.
It's a Joseph job. So I knew that I wanted to not only train more as an actor, but train as a voice and dialect coach. And there were 2 programs in Canada that offered that. But I think UVic was, on hiatus that particular. I might be misremembering. Anyway, so for whatever reason, it got narrowed down just to Europe. And the only time that they had available was like immediately after my contract was done in South Korea and after I'd done some traveling. So I flew from Tokyo. I was in Japan for a bit. I flew from Tokyo back to Busan, where I was based, from Busan to Seoul, from Seoul direct to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai to Pearson Airport. And then 2 days later, I had to audition. So I don't know if you've experienced this, but after you cross the international date line, you're a bit like, a bowl of ramen. You're just kind of squiggling all over. So I did that audition thinking, oh man, I'm not going to get this. Like I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm jet lagged.
Those are the ones.
I don't think that this is going to, but I wasn't as nervous because I was like, I'm too tired. And I didn't think I was going to get it. But I'll tell you one thing, sitting across the table from David Smuggler and Eric Armstrong, I felt this tremendous amount of calm. It seemed like the two of them were just surrounded by this warm bubble. And I think it's because they do so much breath work in the program. There's so much talk of mindfulness and meditation and a lot of the movement practices like Alexander are based on like optimizing and being as healthy as possible. So they really embodied those practices. And I thought to myself, I've been on these tours of other universities and I've met their staff and they're crazy, chaotic all over the place. And these two people are just calm. And they felt very safe. They just felt like they wanted to cultivate the best group of people possible. And so I didn't know much about them, but I knew in that moment that they were going to provide me the kind of sincere and generous attention that I wanted. So I left thinking, if nothing else, I just really enjoyed this trip. And then 3 weeks later, they gave me a slot.
Wow.
Where were you for those 3 weeks? Were you still in Toronto or did you
No, I went back to Florida and I just took some walks with my mom. We're just chilling around the block, eating froyo or whatever. Just vibes.
Yeah, it's just liming, waiting for the call. Whatever happens.
No,
I love that.
just eating.
There's something about this story though of having like that journey. If that person walks into the rehearsal hall and you hear that they've done that many flights to get to the audition, quite frankly, I'm like, that's a lot of effort. I mean,
yeah,
come on.
Welcome. You're hired.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's so funny. People say I go through a lot of trouble and I take that as a tremendous compliment. I do work quite hard. But when people think of it as like impressive or a feat, I'm like, that's what was required. They were not moving the audition date for their MFA program for me. They said, these are the dates.
Yeah.
We will give you a time slot. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting on a plane.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Amaka, what is your theater origin story? What made you want to start doing this? Now, you've mentioned more of a movement-based person, but so what brought you to theater in the first place, and how did you find your way to a movement practice?
Well, my movement practice, I would consider like a lot more of a personal thing. It's kind of the way in to plays for me. But yeah, I guess I've been shaking my thing since I was a wee one. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. It's a little bit of I don't want to call it a mistake or an accident, but it's like it was an unexpected turn of events for me. So, little baby Max was singing and dancing all the time in the little house. And my mom said, somebody do something with all of this energy. But we at school. No, she was very encouraged. Actually, I was very inspired by her because she was also a singer. She'd be singing around the house all the time and playing beautiful music. And I just idolized her and wanted to be like her. So, she was very, supportive actually from the jump, but she was like, it seems like you have something inside of you that wants to come out. And so I need to put you in the place where that can be nurtured. And, it turned out to be, this is all happening in Lagos, Nigeria, by the way. So, her priority was making sure that I had a solid education, which, is not well offered by the public school system there. So she enrolled me in a private school, which had a lot of wonderful extracurriculars, performing arts being one of them. And I started there doing school plays and musicals. Then, with the notion that this would be a hobby and I was going to become a computer scientist like my mom, who was my god and my idol. So around the time, we moved over to Canada, and the bent had kind of changed, moved on from computer science to medicine, which was very much encouraged by an uncle of mine who is a neurosurgeon. So yeah, did school plays and musicals, and then started getting like I guess Western dance styles of ballet and jazz when I was about 16. It was an option, during school and high school. And then I went to the University of Calgary to start my pre-med journey. And, a bunch of circumstances beyond my control found me in the audition room for the Randolph College for Performing Arts. I was encouraged by someone who had just graduated from there. He was like, "They're coming to Calgary. They're doing auditions. You should go." So I went, and they accepted me, and I thought, well, I guess I could do this. Like, I guess I can go, and try my hand at this. I always wanted like a more well-rounded, instruction in the performing arts. And, I brought it up to my mom, and she was like, "Yes, that makes sense. You should, you can go ahead and do that." And then of course, like promptly continued to pull heaven and earth together to make sure that I would be okay, moving across the country to join the circus. And then after that, I stayed. I thought, well, I've got this training completed, and, I've been introduced to some of the professionals here in Toronto. I can stick around and see what happens if I audition for things. Try my hand, try my luck. And the rest is silence. The rest is history. I'm surprised all the time. Like I would, for a couple of years, I would be like, am I living someone else's dream? But no, I don't think so. I think that, we love a good plot twist. And I think that seems to be like the way that it was ordained, or that it was meant to be, or that it was written. The world is wide, and I have a range of interests, but I think, ever since I was a little tyke, I've just wanted to entertain people and, and tell stories and dress up and, pretend, make believe, that sort of thing. And I'm also very interested in human life and in wellness and in health, but I think like the doctors need something to do on their night off. And as opposed to, watching other surgeons do surgery, every once in a while they might meet the medicine of an escape into a farm in Florida, with their little ones, to learn something that you can't learn in a book. You can't get 100% on a test for. Yeah, that's, it wasn't me. It happened on the way to the bar.
A funny thing happened on the way to medical school.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you, did you, as you were like heading over into like going into to Randolph and things like that, did you ever look back at yourself and say, I was supposed to be a doctor? Or did you just like go and like never look back?
Very much so during the pandemic. You know, personally, I felt like, oops, I took the wrong turn at the fork, because as much as we were sustained and comforted by the art that was available, like the theater industry was kaput, and the need for medical attention was astronomical. And so I was, sitting there, teaching kids Shakespeare online, wondering like, would this crisis be better served by like, Mackie in a land, stirring up the mainstream dish instead. So yeah, I do think about it all the time. I think we all have a past. We all have regrets, and I do wonder. It's hard not to think about like the parallel universe version of somebody, of all of us that did a different thing. But like I said, art is medicine too, and I can't complain. I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't.
But now, as sort of like jumping into this new role as an assistant director, now as you're sort of settling into that, and I don't think anybody jumps right into being a director. It's good to learn from really talented and smart directors like Tanisha, and other people that you might work with in the future. But after that, do you think it's possible that you might direct, or are you happy as an assistant?
I'm very, I have a few, events on the horizon. And I think what has worked for me so far is an openness to whatever comes, a willingness to be uncomfortable. And I think that I will continue to move forward in that way. I can't tell, like, more than ever now, I'm just aware of the fact that like, it's just gonna come at you. Like, yes, I have hopes and wishes and dreams, but sometimes the best, like the most fulfilling events are absolute chance. Like, just leave it up to circumstance. And it's been this way, I think, since I graduated from theater school, where the community is the network. Like the network, is the agent for like all of this miraculous change that has happened. So yeah, I do. I hope to do anything and everything that this world will allow me. So yeah, bring it on.
Absolutely. Yes. Just as I bring the conversation to a close, you've been in rehearsal for Sweeter for a little while now.
Week and a half.
And as the show has come together, for each of you, what's something that has surprised you about this show so far?
I am surprised and touched by how affectionate and tender it is. Even though, yes, that is what I wrote, but it was so funny because one day, I think it was just the last rehearsal I had, that Tanisha removed one of the hugs from it. And she was like, take it to more. I didn't realize. And touch is my love language. It's my primary love language. And I didn't realize that it's like one character brushes past the other one and puts an arm around them to warm them up. Another character kisses. Like there's so many elements of affection and warmth and tenderness. And I wrote specifically with their hands, with their bodies, this smile, this grin, they dance, they laugh. There's so much of it that feels romantic even. And not in a way of like sexuality, but just in a way of passion and whimsy and in a sense of being enamored with someone. And I had no idea that that's what came across, but it is deeply who I am as a person. I'm very romantic. And I remembered watching rehearsals going, I didn't realize that there's so much of it in this piece. And it's so soft and tender and in moments. And yeah, it's so emotional. It's so vulnerable. And I didn't know. I was just writing how I felt at that time. And now that I'm watching it, I'm like, this is my heart on my sleeve. And it's thrilling and a little terrifying. Because anybody who watches it, you're going to know who I am fundamentally as a human. When you see this piece, you're going to be like, oh, that's who Alicia Richardson is. You will know. And yeah. And then I invite you to give me a hug. Please give me more hug.
Awesome. Now, Amaka, is there something that surprised you so far in the rehearsal process?
Oh, it's hard to think of. There's like a new one every day. Gosh, now I'm on the spot. My legs are tingly. Yeah, I think like sitting on the side of the table that I am. I think I'm just surprised by how easily I think things can come together. Like I was sitting, preparing, thinking like, oh, it's going to be so hard to get, and we're going to have to work to, and don't get me wrong, like hard work is happening and we're going there. Like, there's some stuff to get out. There's some stuff to get through. Like it is work as much as it is fun. But yeah, I think I'm surprised by, it warms my heart so much to see both in the fiction and, in the meta, like the real life of making the theater, like Black folks at ease, man, at ease and feeling comfortable and joyful. It's so healing. Yeah. I'm loving that. I'm living for it, to be honest. I'm living for it. I've had a hectic summer, and I learned a lot and grew a lot, but have a lot of a bit of a weight in my chest. And this is just every day. It just feels like it's falling away a little bit more. It's really powerful, really simple stuff. Amazing.
That is absolutely beautiful. Well, Alicia, Amaka, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it. And it sounds like such a beautiful show.
It is. It is a wonderful show. Come see Sweeter, okay? Bring your people. If you don't have any any kiddos in your life, just bring yourself at your most, what's the word? At your most available. Bring yourself. Yeah. Curious. That's right. Bring yourself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Bring yourself and your bestie.
Absolutely.
Bring you and your mango tree, your sweet pea and your mango tree. Come on down. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
All right,
and I'd love to talk to you about it. Like I'm putting it out there. If anybody comes to see this play, shoot me a message, find me on the gram, talk to me in the lobby. I really want to engage with the audience. Please don't be shy. Come see me. Let's talk. I want to hear from you.
Don't talk to me. Thanks. Just kidding.
This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.